Wait a minute. Did you guys think this was just a Marvel channel?
No.
The multiverse is vast, my friends, and today we're flipping the script and kicking off a brand new adventure, DC A to Z. And what better way to dive into the DC cosmos than by spotlighting the trailblazer himself, Earth's original Green Lantern. No, not Hal Jordan, not John Stewart, but the OG Alan Scott.
We're not worthy! We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
Born into the name Alan Ladd Wellington Scott, Jesus Christ, was born in the roaring 1910s, which also happened to be the golden age of trains. This was when the locomotives were kings and the tracks were the veins of America. Raised in Metropolis' shadow in the fictional Gotham-like city of Capital City, Alan didn't spend his childhood dreaming of capes or glowing rings. Instead, he was fascinated by engineering, puzzles, and oddly enough, the color green, though I believe that last part was a happy accident. Alan grew up with grit, curiosity, and a bit of an independent streak. Translation, he was stubborn. He worked his way through college earning an engineering degree, becoming the sort of upstanding young man you'd want to build your railway bridge, but probably not attend your poker night. Little did he know his life would soon take a detour. Alan's big break came when he landed a job as a civil engineer helping construct a brand new railroad in Capital City. He was on the fast track, pun intended, to success. His keen eye for detail and sharp mind made him a favorite among his peers, but as we know in the world of comics, things rarely go smoothly for ambitious young men with a bright future. In the obscure mountains of China, a mysterious green meteorite had crash landed centuries earlier, and by the 1930s, a fragment of it made its way into the possession of a villainous mogul. Because of course it did. That fragment, forged into a lantern, would soon become the keystone in Alan's fate. One fateful night during a routine train test on Capital City's new line, a saboteur planted explosives on the bridge that Alan designed. The train derailed, crashing into the river below. Among the wreckage, it was Alan who discovered the glowing green lantern. While Alan was suffering from survivor's guilt, the lantern's mysterious energy reached out to him. It whispered promises of power and destiny. It was at this moment that Alan Scott became Earth's first Green Lantern. In case you aren't aware what a Green Lantern could do, I'll summarize his powers. Alan Scott's powers as the Green Lantern was a blend of imagination, determination, and magic fueled by the green flame of life. His ring allowed him to project emerald energy into almost anything he could envision. Constructs like weapons, shields, and even the occasional oversized boxing glove. With his ring, Alan could take to the skies and fly, manipulate light to conceal himself or disorient foes. He could also channel its energy for remarkable strength and durability. He could even heal himself and others. He's the OG for a reason. Alan's early adventures revolved around protecting Capital City from all manner of criminals, like saboteurs, mobsters, supervillains with questionable fashion sense. His main nemesis was the fiendish Vandal Savage, an immortal tyrant whose hobbies included world domination, sinister plotting, and being annoyingly immortal. Savage didn't let Alan's glowing magic ring intimidate him, but Alan consistently sent him packing. You would think that fighting crime was stressful enough, but no. Alan's personal life added extra spice to the mix. Alan's fiancée, Rose Canton, was hiding a teensy little secret. She had a split personality and occasionally morphed into a villain named Thorn, complete with the ability to control plants. Rose's alter ego gave Alan more headaches than Vandal Savage ever did. The whole thing was like a tragic love story straight out of Days of Our Lives, Superhero Edition. Alan eventually joined forces with the other Golden Age heroes to form the Justice Society of America, the precursor to every superhero team you know today. Picture the Avengers, but with fewer intergalactic threats and more intergenerational squabbles. Alan brought his unique charm to the team, which roughly translated to, "I'll go it alone, but thanks for the help, guys." You think Superman had it bad, well, get a load of this. Alan's ring didn't play by normal superhero rules. Instead of being fueled by willpower like Hal Jordan's ring, Alan's power came from his own sheer determination, and a touch of magic. Unfortunately, the ring had one absurd flaw. It didn't work against wood. Yes, wood. Forget kryptonite. Alan's weakness is something that's easily accessible to almost anyone he faces. That's gotta be a pain in the ass. Alan Scott's story is one of brilliance and resilience, but it's also one that was overshadowed as the superhero world evolved. As Earth's first Green Lantern, he carried the weight of defining heroism for an entire generation. His adventures stood as a testament to courage, cleverness, and an unwavering belief in doing what's right. But as the Silver Age brought a new wave of Green Lanterns such as Hal Jordan, Alan's unique legacy started to fade in the emerald glow of his successors. Overshadowed but never forgotten, Alan remained a cornerstone of the Golden Age. His stories reminding readers of a time when heroism was simpler but no less meaningful. He may not have patrolled the cosmos or battled intergalactic threats, but his tales are grounded in humanity, perseverance, and the magic of believing in oneself. In many ways, Alan's legacy is richer for staying rooted in these values, carving out a lane that's entirely his own. To rediscover Alan Scott's adventures is to honor the unsung pioneer of the Green Lantern mythos. His journey proves that even if history shifts its spotlight elsewhere, the true heroes are those whose stories continue to inspire. Dive into his world and let his emerald flame, once the first, remind you with every great legacy starts with a single light. Alfred Thaddeus Crane Pennyworth, the man, the myth, and the impeccably dressed legend. Before he was brewing tea for Gotham's most brooding billionaire and patching up vigilante wounds, Alfred lived the quite charmed and cheeky life. Let's rewind the clock and explore the early years of the world's most capable butler. Spoiler alert, capes weren't part of his wardrobe yet, but the sass? Oh, it's all there. Now, depending on the iteration, his origin may vary, so I'll try to cover what I can. Alfred was born in England. His family came from a long line of butlers, so the art of eyebrow-arching disapproval and delivering the perfect quip over breakfast were practically encoded in his DNA. But young Alfred wasn't always inclined to follow the polished footsteps of his ancestors. He aspired to be an actor, a dream that would eventually gift him with the flair for dramatic entrances and the ability to keep a straight face no matter how ludicrous Bruce Wayne's nighttime escapades became. Alfred's early days were a blend of theatrical ambition and a touch of espionage-like adventure. He graced the stages of London's theaters, earning applause and the occasional bouquet for his compelling performances. Whether it was Shakespearean tragedies or light-hearted comedies, Alfred brought a certain gravitas to every role he starred in. This is where differences in iteration come in. Depending on which backstory you favor, Alfred either served in the British intelligence during World War II or was drawn into clandestine operations later in life. Either way, these experiences equipped him with skills far beyond team-making and dusting the Batcave. Hand-to-hand combat. Check. Tactical brilliance.
Get off.
Double check. Delivering a perfectly timed one-liner while disarming a foe.
There's no safe there.
Alfred, be careful, the Joker's an arch criminal.
I know, madam, but a very poor fencer.
Triple check. Eventually, Alfred found himself drawn back into the family trade, though not without a dash of reluctance. Depending on who you ask, his father, Jarvis Pennyworth, either encouraged or guilt-tripped him into taking up the mantle of service. Alfred's early days in Wayne Manor were marked by his trademark blend of professionalism and personality. He established himself as a consummate butler, managing the sprawling estate. But beyond the polished silverware and perfect place settings, Alfred quickly became a trusted confidant to both Thomas and Martha. Alfred wasn't just there to serve meals or keep the manor spotless. He became an indispensable ally in Thomas Wayne's philanthropic and medical endeavors. Alfred's sharp mind and resourcefulness made him a key player behind the scenes. Whether it was organizing charity galas or advising on complex logistical issues, Alfred proved he was more than just a man with a duster. He was a man of action and ideas. His rapport with Martha was equally strong. Her compassionate nature and Alfred's dry wit created a dynamic that brought warmth to the often cold halls of Wayne Manor. Together, they found ways to make Wayne Manor feel more like a home and less like an intimidating monument to Gotham's wealth. Alfred's role expanded sooner with the birth of Bruce Wayne. While Thomas and Martha were doting parents, Alfred quickly became an unofficial third guardian. From soothing Bruce's cries with lullabies to teaching him the importance of manners, Alfred became an integral part of Bruce's early years. It was during this time that Alfred's softer side began to shine. His role wasn't just to serve the family, but to truly care for them. Unbeknownst to any of them, Alfred's time with Thomas and Martha was a prelude to the storm that would forever change their lives. But in those golden years, Alfred was the glue that held the Wayne household together. A quiet hero who ensured everything from family dinners to philanthropic adventures went off without a hitch. And so, Alfred's journey with the Waynes began in those early days of elegance and hope, a foundation of loyalty and love that would define his role for decades to come. Little did he know, though, his life was about to intertwine with one of the most extraordinary legacies ever to grace Gotham streets. Thomas and Martha's murder left an indelible mark on Alfred, as it did on all who knew them. But for Alfred, the loss wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. He mourned not only the individuals, but the dreams and ideals they carried. The Waynes were a beacon of hope for Gotham, and their untimely deaths cast a long shadow over the city. In the aftermath, Alfred assumed responsibility for Bruce, a grieving child plunged into a world of loneliness and anger. But despite the overwhelming circumstances, Alfred did not falter. His mission became clear: to protect Bruce, to guide him, and to ensure that the young heir found a way to rise above the darkness that had threatened to consume him. Alfred's relationship with Bruce evolved profoundly after the tragedy. He stepped beyond the role of butler and became Bruce's guardian, offering comfort, wisdom, and structure during the boy's most vulnerable years. Where grief and anger might have led Bruce astray, Alfred provided a steady hand, teaching him discipline and resilience. As Bruce grew older and began channeling his pain into a mission of justice, Alfred found himself navigating uncharted territory. Though he harbored concerns about the path Bruce was taking, Alfred respected a young man's resolve and supported him in his transformation into the Dark Knight. Alfred's skills, honed in his earlier years, became indispensable. His knowledge of medicine allowed him to patch up Bruce after countless encounters with Gotham's criminal underworld. His tactical insights, gleaned from his rumored espionage background, helped refine Batman's methods. His theatrical experience even played a role, guiding Bruce into creating the mystique of the Bat. As Batman's trusted ally, Alfred became the keeper of countless secrets. He ensured that Wayne Manor and the Batcave operated seamlessly, maintaining a delicate balance between Bruce's public persona and his nocturnal activities. His discretion was absolute, even as challenges grew more complex with the arrival of allies like Robin and enemies like the Joker. Throughout Bruce's journey, Alfred remained a pillar of support, often serving as the voice of reason and the moral compass. While Bruce faced the dangers of Gotham head-on, Alfred worked tirelessly behind the scenes, ensuring that the mission was never faltered. Alfred Pennyworth stands as a cornerstone not just of Wayne Manor, but of Gotham itself. A quiet yet formidable force whose unwavering loyalty and boundless wisdom have shaped one of comic books' most iconic legends. His impact transcends the boundaries of his role as a butler. Alfred is a guardian, a mentor, in many ways a hero. Through his strength and compassion and razor-sharp wit, he has been Bruce Wayne's anchor, the moral compass guiding a broken boy and a mass vigilante alike. Alfred embodies the idea that heroism is not solely defined by capes and gadgets, but by the steadfast commitment to others, the courage to stand firm in the face of darkness, and the ability to bring humanity to even the most daunting of circumstances. Without Alfred, Batman's journey would be incomplete. He is the man who gave Bruce the tools, not just the physical, but emotional, to weather the storm and fight for justice. No matter the iteration of his story, Alfred reminds us that greatness often lies in the quiet acts of love, sacrifice, and support. He is the unsung hero of Gotham, a character who exemplifies the profound impact one person can have on the lives of others. Through Alfred Pennyworth, we see the strength of loyalty, the power of kindness, and the enduring importance of hope. To put it simply, Gotham may have its dark night, but it's Alfred who ensures that the light within him never goes out. Before she was the most feared woman in Washington, Amanda Blake Waller was a mother, a wife, and a survivor. Born in the rough streets of Chicago's Cabrini Green housing projects, Waller learned early that the system wasn't built to protect people like her, it was built to forget them. From a young age, Amanda learned that survival required more than toughness. It demanded intelligence, resilience, and the ability to make hard choices quickly. She married young and started a family, dreaming of a life far removed from the trauma of her upbringing, but that dream shattered in a single night. Amanda and her husband Joseph had 5 children in total, but depending on which continuity you follow, it may vary. Her eldest son Derek, a promising athlete, was gunned down by a street gang after refusing to join them. Her daughter Demetria was sexually assaulted and later killed trying to flee the same gang. Amanda's husband Joseph fell into a deep depression consumed by guilt and helplessness. He was later murdered when he confronted the gang responsible in a futile act of vengeance. In the comics, very little is revealed about her surviving children, and that could very well be intentional. Waller is obsessively private about them, using her political power and secrecy to keep them far removed from her work. She may be ruthless with the lives of criminals and operatives, but when it comes to her children, she draws a line. They represent what's left of her humanity. But instead of succumbing to grief, Amanda turned it into fuel. She returned to school, earned degrees in political science and psychology, and then she also became a researcher and analyst for congressional committees. Her work brought her into contact with classified government programs, where she quickly demonstrated an uncanny knack for dissecting systems of power and exploiting them. It was during this time she uncovered files on Task Force X, a defunct Cold War Black Ops program that used expendable assets for deniable missions. Recognizing the potential in this idea and believing that traditional heroism had proven unreliable, Waller reactivated and restructured the program with her own ruthless vision. Under her leadership, Task Force X became the Suicide Squad. Waller recruited metahumans, psychopaths, career criminals, all from incarceration. He would then implant explosive devices in their necks and send them out on missions no one else would touch. The plan was simple: obey orders or die. Waller didn't care about redemption arcs. All she cared about was results. What set Waller apart wasn't just her cold pragmatism, it was her absolute control. She operated in the shadows but had eyes everywhere. She had them on superheroes, foreign threats. She had eyes on the very people who signed her paychecks. She amassed secrets, leveraged weaknesses. She built a reputation as the one person in Washington who never blinks. Amanda Waller quickly proved that she wasn't just another bureaucrat with an idea. She was a force of nature. Her operation, unofficially dubbed the Suicide Squad, became the US government's most dirtiest secret, a revolving door of expendable supervillains sent on suicide missions in exchange for commuted sentences, or more often than not, a closed casket. Waller didn't flinch in the face of chaos. If a mission went sideways, she didn't hesitate detonating the failsafe implanted in her indentured soldiers. Some called her cruel, others called her brilliant. She didn't care what they called her so long as they obeyed. Her authority was tested early when Batman himself confronted her about the Suicide Squad. He broke into her high security facility thinking he could scare her into shutting down the program. But Waller didn't just hold her ground. She matched the Dark Knight stare for stare and said to his face, "I am not scared of you. And if you ever come at me like that again, I will bury you with the rest." I'll give props to Waller for that, but I would never be able to say that to the Dark Knight's face. I mean, just imagine, if you ever come at me again, I'll... She wasn't just posturing there either. Waller knew every hero's secret identity, every psychological vulnerability, and she had files that made the Batcave look like a public library. Her true superpower, information weaponized by will. While heroes like Alan Scott believed in diplomacy, Waller believed in leverage and wasn't above using metahuman threats or a foreign instability as bargaining chips. If someone had to get their hands dirty, she'd volunteer both hands. Waller wasn't just managing a crisis, she was manufacturing control. In one of the storylines, she orchestrated a mass exile of Earth's supervillains to a distant, uninhabitable planet, intended as a permanent solution to Earth's endless cycle of destruction. Naturally, it spiraled into a villain-on-villain warfare, but Waller, ever the realist, saw it as an acceptable collateral. Not her best plan, but definitely one of her boldest. Waller wasn't afraid of the big dogs either. When the Justice League finally came knocking, Waller didn't blink. Instead of folding under pressure, she unleashed her trump card, a secret, darker Suicide Squad filled with magical and psychic weapons she kept in deep freeze. Her message to Earth's greatest heroes was clear: you play by your rules, I'll play by the ones that keep the world spinning. And that's what separates Waller from everyone else. She's not driven by ego, vengeance, or a need for validation. She sees the world as it is, flawed, unstable, dangerous, and she acts accordingly, cold, calculating, and unflinching. Superman might inspire hope, Batman might instill fear, and Wonder Woman might command awe, but Amanda Waller ensures results. Amanda Waller's story is not one of heroism or villainy. It's a study in moral compromise, of what happens when a person believes so deeply in control and survival that they're willing to sacrifice their soul to protect the world. She's a woman forged by personal tragedy, sharpened by systemic injustice, and armored with an unshakable belief that if no one else is willing to do the unthinkable, she will. In a universe full of demigods, alien saviors, Amanda Waller is something arguably more dangerous. A human with no illusions. She doesn't believe in fairy tale justice or redemption arcs. She believes in risk management, realpolitik, and leverage. Some might argue her story is a cautionary tale as much as it is a character study. The lesson: righteousness without accountability becomes tyranny, but so does fear without empathy. Amanda Waller walks that razor's edge. That complexity is part of what makes her such an enduring and controversial figure. She's been criticized, and rightfully so, for her authoritarian tactics, her willingness to violate civil liberties, and her manipulative use of trauma and coercion. Readers and characters alike question, is she a necessary evil or just evil with good PR? But that criticism is the point. Waller isn't a character designed to make us feel comfortable. She's designed to make us ask the hard questions. Questions like, do the ends justify the means? Who holds the powerful accountable when they operate in the shadows? Or what does justice look like when all the easy choices are gone? Amanda Waller represents cold, uncompromising logic in a world driven by ideals. She operates in the shadows, trading morality for results and wielding power with cold precision. Unmoved by heroism and unshaken by threats, she makes the impossible choices others refuse to touch, sacrificing lives, trust, and even her own humanity if it means preserving the greater good. Whether seen as a necessary evil or a tyrant in a suit, Waller doesn't flinch, she doesn't apologize, and never waits for permission. She's not a hero the world wants, but she's the consequence it deserves. Before she was a magical powerhouse with a gemstone arsenal, Amy Winston was living the quiet life in suburban Earth. Adopted by Herb and Marion Winston, she grew up blissfully unaware that she was the last surviving heir to a magical monarchy. Her adoptive parents were completely in the dark about the fact that their daughter had been smuggled from another dimension by a witch named Citrina. Citrina had rescued baby Amy from Gemworld after her parents, rulers of House Amethyst, were assassinated by the tyrant Dark Opal. Citrina hid Amy on Earth, suppressed her powers, and let her live a normal life until she was ready to reclaim her destiny. And for 13 years, Amy's life was textbook ordinary. School, friends, birthday parties, nothing remotely magical. But on her 13th birthday, Citrina sent her a mysterious amethyst necklace that acted like a magical homing beacon. The moment Amy touched it, she was pulled through a portal to Gemworld, where time worked differently. It aged her into a full-grown warrior woman in seconds. Her arrival wasn't exactly met with a royal welcome. Amy was immediately kidnapped by a grotesque ogre and dragged to Dark Opal's stronghold. Things looked grim, until she was rescued by Granch, a loyal servant of House Amethyst. Granch, who had defected from Dark Opal's ranks, whisked her away from danger and reunited her with Citrina. Citrina, the witch mother who had orchestrated Amy's escape to Earth as a baby, finally laid all of the cards on the table. She explained Amy's true identity as Princess Amaya of House Amethyst, the most powerful of Gemworld's 12 gemstone houses. Citrina also introduced her to the political structure of Gemworld, where each house was tied to a magical gemstone and ruled by a noble family. The House of Amethyst had once been the ruling power, but after the assassination of Amy's birth parents, Dark Opal seized control and plunged the realm into tyranny. Amy, now physically aged into an adult due to Gemworld's time dilation, was thrust into a crash course in magical warfare, diplomacy, and royal responsibility. Citrina began training her in the use of her latent magical abilities, which were tied to the amethyst stone and capable of creating constructs, casting spells, and manipulating energy. Amy's powers were formidable but raw. She had to learn quickly because Dark Opal wasn't going to wait for her to finish her magical homework. This marked the beginning of her dual life. Earth Teen by day and Gemworld Warrior by portal. She would travel back and forth balancing algebra tests and magical duels, all while trying to keep her adoptive parents from worrying too much about her sudden disappearances. With her birth parents assassinated by the tyrant Dark Opal, Amy's return marked the beginning of a long-awaited rebellion. One of her earliest, most defining moments came during the battle for Castle Amethyst, where she led the defense of her ancestral home against a siege by Dark Opal's army. Though inexperienced, Amy's leadership and raw magical talent helped repel the attack, earning her the respect of Gemworld's resistance and solidifying her as the role of warrior princess. This was also when she began forming alliances with other gemstone houses, including Garnet and Sapphire, who saw in her a chance to restore balance to the realm. Her diplomatic instincts and natural charisma helped unite factions that had long been divided by fear and mistrust. As Amy's powers grew, so did her responsibilities. Following Citrina's death, Amethyst inherited her mentor's mantle and became a Lord of Order, a cosmic title that placed her in direct opposition to the Lords of Chaos. This elevated her from local royalty to interdimensional guardian and brought her into conflict with powerful adversaries like Child, a terrifying sorceress who embodied chaos itself. Her story also took a personal turn with the arrival of Carnelian, Dark Opal's adopted son and Amy's Earthborn rival. Raised in Gemworld and armed with advanced technology instead of magic, Carnelian represented a twisted mirror of Amy's own journey. Amethyst and her adventures didn't just stop at Gemworld's borders. She later joined the Justice League Dark, fighting alongside mystics like Zatanna and Constantine. She also became a member of Young Justice, proving that she could hold her own in both magical and superhero circles. Her interdimensional resume expanded as she tackled threats that spanned realities, all while maintaining her dual identity as Amy Winston, a girl from Earth and with a destiny written in crystal. When Amethyst joined Justice League Dark, it wasn't just a career move, it was a cosmic recalibration. After years of defending Gemworld and juggling her Earth identity, Amy Winston stepped into the new role among DC's most mystically inclined misfits. This wasn't the Justice League of capes and catchphrases, it was a shadowy spell-slinging squad that handled threats that were too weird, too ancient, and too cursed for the mainstream heroes. Her inclusion into the team brought uniqueness. As a Lord of Order and sovereign of a magical realm, she wasn't just another spellcaster. She was a walking conduit of crystalline power. Her abilities made her a valuable asset in battles against eldritch horrors and chaos-born entities. But more than that, she offered something few others could: a connection to Gemworld's ancient magic, which often proved crucial when the team faced threats that spanned dimensions. Her time with Justice League Dark also forced her to confront darker aspects of magic, its cost, its corruption, its moral complexity. Unlike the structured gemstone politics of Gemworld, Earth's magic was messy and unpredictable. Amy had to adapt, learning to trust her instincts and occasionally bend her own rules to protect the greater good. It was a humbling experience, but one that deepened her character and expanded her worldview. Though her tenure in the team wasn't permanent, it left a lasting impact. Amethyst proved that she could operate beyond the borders of Gemworld, that her magic wasn't confined to the royal halls of gemstone rituals. She became a bridge between realms, a warrior scholar who could navigate both cosmic order and earthly chaos. And when she eventually returned to her own dimension, she carried with her the lessons, the scars, and the friendships she forged in the darkest corners of DC's magical universe. Amethyst isn't just a glittering footnote in DC's magical archives. She's a symbol of transformation, resilience, and the power of dual identity. Her story bridges two worlds, the grounded reality of Earth and the fantastical chaos of Gemworld. And in doing so, she shows us that heroism isn't about where you come from, it's about who you choose to fight for. Amy Winston's journey from suburban teen to interdimensional warrior princess is a masterclass in embracing one's destiny, even if it arrives wrapped in mystery and danger. Her battles aren't just against tyrants and chaos gods, they're against self-doubt, grief, and the pressure of living up to a legacy she never asked for. Through it all, she remains compassionate, clever, and fiercely loyal to both her homes. Amethyst proves that true strength can shimmer with grace. It's a reminder that power isn't found in spectacle, it's found in purpose, in courage, and in the quiet, unwavering choice to lead with heart. Lonnie Machin was never meant to be ordinary. Raised in Washington, D.C. by adoptive parents who barely scratched the surface of his brilliance, Lonnie's childhood was shaped less by nurture and more by an unquenchable thirst for truth. From the moment he could read, he was devouring books far beyond his age: economics, political theory, and even philosophy. He understood systems, dissected them, and most of all, he questioned them. While other kids were busy playing video games, Lonnie was hacking into government databases, not for chaos, but to expose lies buried in bureaucratic silence. He was disillusioned by the suffering around him. He saw poverty in plain sight, justice twisted to serve wealth, politicians fattened by corporate greed. Lonnie realized that education and intelligence weren't enough. The world didn't change through debate, it changed through disruption. So he created Anarchy, a figure not of destruction but of transformation. Cloaked in red and gold and armed with a bow staff and an arsenal of home-crafted tech, Anarchy wasn't a symbol of rebellion for its own sake. He was a force of calculated insurgence. His mission was simple: to dismantle corrupt power structures and awaken the masses to the illusion of choice they lived under. Every act of sabotage he committed was a manifesto, every broadcasted message a call to awareness. Anarchy didn't see himself as a villain, and honestly, he wasn't one, but his methods were extreme. He targeted CEOs who used children in overseas sweatshops. He outed politicians with backdoor deals to private prison contractors. To Anarchy, crime was often a symptom, not the disease. So he went after the disease, which was greed, oppression, and the silent engines of injustice. Naturally, this put him at odds with vigilantes who upheld the system from within, most notably Batman. Lonnie respected the Dark Knight's intellect, but couldn't understand his loyalty to a city that chewed up people and called it order. Their encounters were often less battles of fists and more of ideology. Two brilliant minds with the same goal but opposing blueprints for how to get there. His first targeted attacks were against individuals and institutions he saw as the real villains of society. He went after corrupt landlords evicting tenants to make way for luxury condos. He went after polluters dumping toxic waste into low-income neighborhoods, and he also went after politicians pocketing public funds behind smiles and sound bites. These weren't random acts of assault. There were messages carved into the machinery of civilization. Lonnie made sure after every action was followed with a public declaration, often broadcasted through hacked signals or graffiti marks that burned themselves into the public. The message: wake up, you're being used. One of his missions involved infiltrating a corporate gala hosted by a weapons manufacturer responsible for selling arms to both sides of an international conflict. Disguised among the elite, Lonnie used a mixture of charm and cloaked tech to expose the CEO's private emails, detailing bribes, human rights violations, and rigged contracts, and he did this on every digital screen in the building. As guests screamed and security scrambled, Anarchy vanished into the shadows. The fallout was immense. Stocks crashed, investigations launched, but most importantly, people noticed. Lonnie had struck a nerve. He also made headlines by disrupting a major metropolitan bank tied to predatory lending practices. Rather than stealing money, he rerouted the funds from the bank's offshore accounts directly into the savings accounts of the people the institution had defrauded. This gesture wasn't just rebellious, it was surgical economic retribution. Local authorities were baffled. The media called it electronic Robin Hood justice. Batman called it reckless, but Lonnie didn't care. He wasn't just fighting crime, he was rewriting the narrative of what justice could look like. Lonnie had orchestrated a plan to bring down a corrupt slumlord whose buildings were death traps, filled with code violations and vermin, yet yet untouched by the city due to bribes. He rigged the complex with timed explosives, not to kill, but to force an evacuation and draw public attention to the scandal. However, Batman intervened, dismantling the bombs with seconds to spare. The confrontation that followed wasn't just physical, it was philosophical. Lonnie, in his red cloak and golden mask, stood toe-to-toe with the Dark Knight, defending his methods with icy conviction. He wasn't interested in approval, he was interested in results. That moment cemented him not as a sidekick or as a villain, but as a force that challenged even Gotham's greatest mind to question his limits. As Lonnie matured, so did Anarchy. What began as a youthful rebellion honed itself into ideological warfare. No longer satisfied with symbolic gestures or flashy takedowns of local corruption, Lonnie turned his focus to the deeper roots of control, surveillance states, economic manipulation, and digital authoritarianism. He evolved from a masked saboteur into a political architect, one willing to tear down entire infrastructures if it meant building something better in its place. The hood and cloak remained, but behind the mask, the boy was gone. In his place stood a man with a sharper edge and a much colder fire. Lonnie began manipulating systems from within. He embedded himself in global data streams. He launched decentralized networks to empower the disenfranchised, and he crafted digital platforms meant to replace traditional governance. He operated almost entirely in the digital ether, a ghost in the servers toppling corrupt enterprises from across the globe without ever stepping outside. In those years, Anarchy became less a figure in red and more of a myth in digital resistance. Nations didn't know if they were dealing with one man or a movement. As his operations expanded, so did the collateral. A planned data leak accidentally compromised undercover human rights workers. A blackout meant to disrupt an arms deal had led to hospital ventilators shutting down. These weren't intentional deaths, but they haunted him. The line between revolutionary and terrorist began to blur, and Lonnie was forced to confront the price of his mission. He became more isolated, more careful, but not less determined. Each time he clashed with Batman, the tension was more layered. They weren't just opponents, they were parallel paths diverging. Batman believed in reform of the systems. Anarchy believed the systems themselves were the problem. Their battles became quieter, more complex, fought in conversations and interference and silent mutual sabotage. On occasion, Anarchy even found himself working with the Bat family, when their interests aligned, that is. Things like human trafficking rings, authoritarian crackdowns, or the kind of global corruption that even Gotham couldn't contain. But those alliances were temporary. Lonnie never forgot who they were protecting, and they never fully trusted him either. There was also a cancelled story arc that could have brought even more complexity to Anarchy. In this non-canonical story, it was implied that Lonnie's biological father was the Joker. Had this story continued, I'm sure the knowledge of the Joker being his biological father would have never left him, and in darker moments, it would have gnawed at the edges of his convictions. He would have questioned his instincts. He would have wondered if the rage burning under his logic was inherited by madness in disguise. But I don't think he ever would have surrendered to it. In this hypothetical story, the proof that even if chaos ran through his veins, he could still choose purpose, still shape his own legacy. Anarchy is not a symbol of destruction. He's a symbol of disobedience, of discomfort. He's a symbol of the human refusal to accept that the way things are the way they must be. Lonnie's journey from brilliant child to hardened ideological insurgent is a reminder of the people's collective complacency. He doesn't fight for applause. He doesn't save cats from trees or wear a badge of justice handed down by a broken system. He exists in that dangerous, vital gray space where morality and method collide, and in that collision, uncomfortable truths emerge. What makes Anarchy so powerful and so terrifying is that he's not wrong. His targets are greedy corporations, corrupt politicians, apathetic governments. All of them are real. His criticisms of systemic injustice, wealth disparity, and state-sanctioned violence resonate in a world where those things are not fiction. And yet, his methods force us to flinch, to ask whether righteousness can justify harm, to examine whether a better world can be built on ashes and still be a better world. Anarchy doesn't just challenge Batman or the DC universe. He challenges us. He dares us, the readers, to stop cheering for the hero who cleans up the mess and instead question why the mess exists in the first place. The lesson of Anarchy isn't simple, and it isn't clean either. It's that brilliance without compassion can curdle into cruelty, that passion without patience becomes recklessness, and that systems, no matter how noble in theory, can become prisons if left unquestioned. Through Lonnie's victories and missteps, we're reminded that the real change is messy, often painful, and rarely rewarded, but it is necessary, and more than that, it is possible. In the end, Anarchy is not a villain nor a hero. He's a test, a question, a crack in the mask of normalcy. And whether you agree with him or not, one truth remains unshakable. The world changes because of people like him. People who look at the gears of power and ask, what happens if we stop them from turning? Born a catastrophe, the Anti-Monitor doesn't enter stories, he erases them. The Anti-Monitor came from an antimatter universe called Cord. Think of it as a place where light forgot to show up. His creation was triggered by a cosmic science experiment gone wrong, an ill-fated attempt to witness the birth of an existence itself. That misstep fractured reality and spawned two opposites, the benevolent Monitor and his dark twin, the Anti-Monitor, a being made of pure antimatter with a bottomless appetite for destruction. From his earliest moments, the Anti-Monitor's goal was nothing short of universal genocide. He waged war against the positive matter universe and clashed with his counterpart for eons, both ultimately entering a long dormancy after draining each other's power. When a curious scientist unintentionally repeated the original experiment billions of years later, it cracked open the vault holding the Anti-Monitor's fury. Revived and hungrier than ever, he began consuming entire universes to fuel his conquest, a cosmic buffet where the entrees were reality itself. His abilities stretched well beyond the usual villain fare. He mastered reality manipulation, universe absorption, antimatter blasts, and the kind of gravitational presence that bends storylines to his will. He's not merely a threat, he's the embodiment of deletion, and if you hear of his arrival coming, odds are your universe is already past the point of no return. His first major flex was unleashing a wave of antimatter that devoured entire universes, turning vibrant realities into blank slates. He didn't just destroy worlds, he consumed them to grow stronger, like a villainous black hole with ambition. Along the way, he manipulated Harbinger into betraying his mentor, weaponized shadow demons, and orchestrated the death of major heroes, including a Kryptonian powerhouse and a speedster who outran death until he didn't. Even after being defeated in battle that rewrote the very structure of reality, the Anti-Monitor refused to stay buried. His corpse was later used as a centerpiece of a machine designed to reshape the multiverse. Then came his resurrection as Guardian of Fear, leading an army of intergalactic nightmares. This stint ended with him being hurled into deep space by a rage-fueled Superboy Prime. Later, he clawed his way out of imprisonment inside a death-powered battery, fought the living embodiment of death, and then was banished back to his antimatter universe. When the Anti-Monitor shows up, DC's finest don't just brace for impact, they brace for existential collapse. His run-ins with major characters are less of fights and more of cosmic reckonings. He clashed with Superman multiple times, including a showdown where the Man of Steel had to punch him into a star just to stop his reality-erasing rampage. That wasn't just a punch, it was a multiverse-saving haymaker. Supergirl also took him on in a brutal battle that ended with her sacrificing herself to protect existence, proving that even the strongest heroes sometimes pay the ultimate price. Barry Allen's Flash also had one of the most tragic encounters. Captured and used as a living battery, Barry broke free and destroyed the Anti-Monitor's doomsday weapon by running himself into oblivion, literally outrunning death to save the multiverse. The Green Lanterns have also had their fair share of trauma. When the Anti-Monitor became the Guardian of Fear, he led the Sinestro Corps into Coastal City and turned it into a war zone. Lanterns like Sodom Yacht and Kyle Rayner faced him head on. The Guardians themselves had to intervene, and even then, it was barely enough. He also tangled with Darkseid in a clash of cosmic titans. Their battle wasn't just fists and energy blasts, it was a philosophical slugfest between tyranny and annihilation. The Anti-Monitor ultimately killed Darkseid, proving that even gods aren't safe when he's in town. The Anti-Monitor is more than just a cosmic villain with an appetite for annihilation. He's a narrative force designed to test the limits of hope, identity, and sacrifice. His stories are not simply exercises in destruction, they're cautionary tales about unchecked power, obsession with control, and what happens when curiosity becomes catastrophe. Born from a single forbidden glimpse into creation, he is the embodiment of consequences spiraling beyond comprehension. What makes him more terrifying is that every time the Anti-Monitor rises, he forces heroes and entire timelines to confront the fragility of existence. His presence demands unity in the face of oblivion, pushing characters past their limits and often into sacrifice. The deaths of icons, reshaping of universes, and emotional fallout are never just collateral damage. They're the price paid when forces beyond good and evil rewrite the rules of reality. If there's a lesson buried in the antimatter, it's this: not all battles are won, they're survived, remembered, and used as foundations for rebirth. Our existence is precious, and I think it's something we often take for granted. Take the time to cherish what you have now, because you never know what's lurking in the recesses of dark space. She wasn't just Wonder Woman's aunt, she was a force of nature in her own right. Born of divine will and shaped with purpose, Antiope rose alongside her sister Hippolyta as one of the original Amazons. These were women not simply born but forged by the gods themselves. Where Hippolyta radiated regal strength and measured grace, Antiope burned with raw fire. From her first breath, she was a blade unsheathed, passionate, defiant, and fiercely relentless. Even in the earliest days of Amazon society, Antiope stood apart. She had no patience for quiet councils or abstract philosophy. Her truce lived with the snap of bowstrings and the clash of blades. While others trained, Antiope mastered. She transformed combat into choreography, strategy into art, not driven by bloodlust but by an unshakable urge to protect her sisters, her values, and a world she believed could be reshaped through unity and strength. Yet Antiope was more than just force and fury. Beneath the muscle was a razor-sharp wit and a soldier's practicality. She challenged rules not for rebellion's sake, but to sharpen them, refine them. Her questions were forged in logic, not ego. Her bond with her sister Hippolyta ran deep, though it did spark friction as often as it forged unity. Where Hippolyta led with diplomacy, Antiope wielded blunt truth like a spear. They were opposites, but they were still together. They were balanced, one with the shield and the other the spear. One of her most defining acts was when she chose truth over tradition. Hercules came to the island of Themyscira, not as a guest, but as a deceiver cloaked in charm. He honeyed words and feigned respect. He won Queen Hippolyta's trust, only to betray it with chains and fire. In a single night of treachery, he and his men shattered the sisterhood of peace and bound the Amazons into slavery. After the betrayal and the fight that followed, Antiope couldn't stand with her sister anymore and worship the gods after what had happened. She broke away with the loyal faction, carving out her own mission to continue fighting injustice in a world beyond paradise. It was a decision not made lightly, but it defined her for generations of Amazon who saw strength in not just honor, but also in resistance. This path brought her back into the world of men, a complicated choice for any Amazon. But Antiope never gave up her ideals. She didn't enter the world as a follower, but as an equal. And when love found her, it was with a warrior who honored both her sword and her voice. This wasn't a damsel's tale though. It was a bond between two fighters, forged through shared battles, hard truths, and a deep understanding of what loyalty and sacrifice really meant. Despite all of her victories, all of her heroics, it was her final stand that defined her. Proof that even in death, Antiope chose principle over survival, and left behind not just a legend, but a standard to live by. After Antiope left Themyscira with her loyal Amazons, she found love with Theseus, the legendary Greek hero and king of Athens. Despite the long-standing tension between Amazons and men, she believed that a new future could be built on alliance and trust. But it would be that trust that would cost her everything. The blade may not have been Theseus' own, but the betrayal was his to bear. In various retellings, it suggested that he stood by while others conspired against Antiope, or that he allowed political pressures and ambition to make her expendable. In some versions, it's actually Theseus' court that arranges her assassination. It's not known if it's because they were jealous or if they saw her as a threat, but one way or another, Antiope is struck down, not in battle, but in the heart of the city she helped defend, and by the very people she tried to stand beside. Antiope's death hit like a war drum's final beat. She didn't go quietly, she stood defiant against corruption, choosing to die on her feet rather than bend a knee. For the Amazons, her death wasn't just a loss, it was severing. In that moment, it reinforced why they withdrew from the world of men in the first place, and for Hippolyta, it was a wound that never quite closed. Her sister's death became a cornerstone of the Amazonian memory, a warning etched in blood and silence that trust can be lethal when given to those who worship power more than honor. Antiope's story doesn't sprawl across 1,000 issues, but it doesn't need to. Like a well-placed arrow, it flies fast, hits hard, and leaves something permanent behind. She's a warrior, yes, but more than that, she's the embodiment of conviction. Her strength wasn't just in her sword arm or her battlefield prowess, it was in her choices. She challenged authority when it grew complacent. She loved fiercely, even when the world warned her not to. She took the risk of trust and paid for it with her life, and yet none of that made her weak. It made her real. Antiope shows us that there's no shame in choosing your own path, no weakness in trust, even when it breaks you, and that there's no greater honor than standing up again and again for what's right, especially when the world looks away. Antiope may have fallen, but her spirit never did. She lives on in every warrior who meets the world with a steady gaze, unshaken will, and a heart that refuses to break. Arthur Curry, better known as Aquaman, wasn't always the ocean's most regal defender. His early days were spent straddling two worlds, the human surface and the hidden undersea kingdom of Atlantis. Born to lighthouse keeper Tom Curry and Atlanta, an exiled Atlantean queen, Arthur grew up on the windswept coast of Amnesty Bay, Massachusetts, where he developed an affinity for the sea that went far beyond fishing trips. Arthur's life took a turn toward destiny when he learned of his Atlantean lineage and his claim to the throne. Wrestling with the pull between land and sea, he eventually embraced his heritage, becoming the king of Atlantis and the protector of its vast undersea territories. But being king isn't about lounging on a coral throne all day. Arthur's reign is a constant balancing act, facing Atlantean factions who distrust his half-human blood and a surface world that views him as a mysterious and often misunderstood figure. Though often underestimated thanks to decades of pop culture jokes about talking to fish, Aquaman's power set is actually formidable. He commands the oceans and can summon creatures from the deepest trenches. He can also survive in crushing depths that would pulp most heroes. Aquaman's powers are as vast and layered as the ocean he rules, each one tied to his Atlantean heritage and his unique physiology as a hybrid of the two worlds. His most famous ability, the one pop culture never lets him forget, is his telepathic link with marine life. But in truth, it's far more than just talking to fish. This is a deep, commanding, psionic connection that allows him to summon, direct, and even influence the sea creatures on a massive scale, from schools of fish to colossal leviathans lurking in the ocean's abyss. In moments of crisis, this power can become a force of nature all on its own, rallying the entire sea to his defense. Physically, Aquaman is built both for land and the crushing pressures of the deep. His Atlantean physiology grants him superhuman strength, enough to lift tanks and go toe-to-toe with some of the strongest beings in the DC universe, along with durability that allows him to shrug off bullets and withstand volcanic heat. Underwater, he moves with unmatched speed and agility, capable of swimming at incredible velocities while retaining full combat control. His enhanced senses let him see clearly in the blackest depths and hear the faintest sonar signals, giving him a hunter's edge in any aquatic environment. He's also a master combatant, wielding the legendary Trident of Poseidon with lethal precision. These weapons aren't just ceremonial, they can channel magical energy, pierce nearly any metal, and serve as a symbol of his authority. Putting it all together, Aquaman's abilities make him a hero who commands an entire biome, a sovereign who is both a warrior and a diplomat, and a protector whose battlefield stretches across 70% of the planet. The surface may underestimate him, but the ocean never will. Aquaman's history in DC Comics is a tide of triumphs and tragedies, moments that make him far more than the guy who just talks to dolphins. One of his most defining arcs came when he fully embraced the Atlantean throne, asserting his authority over a kingdom that didn't always want him. As king, he faced everything from civil uprisings to magical incursions, often forced to choose between the survival of Atlantis and his loyalty to the surface world. Those political tightrope acts cemented him as one of DC's most complex monarchs, equal parts warrior, diplomat, and reluctant ruler. Few rivalries in comics are as personal as his feud with Black Manta. What began as a vendetta escalated into tragedy when Manta was responsible for the death of Arthur's infant son, a moment that broke Aquaman's stoic exterior and pushed him to the edge. The loss of his son became a defining wound in his mythology, shaping his more ruthless, no-nonsense approach to dealing with enemies. On another front, his battles with his brother Ocean Master tested not just his combat skills, but his sense of family. With these conflicts, it often blurred the line between personal betrayal and geopolitical conflicts. Arthur has also proven his worth on a global stage, both underwater and in the company of Earth's greatest heroes. As a founding member of the Justice League, he stood shoulder to shoulder with Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman, taking on threats that dwarf even his oceanic domain. He's repelled alien invasions, faced primordial horrors from the sea's abyss, and defended the world from cataclysmic floods that could wipe out civilization. Through these moments, Aquaman has consistently shattered the punchline perception, showing that the oceans are as dangerous and worth protecting as any battlefield on land or in space. In his later life, Aquaman's story shifted from proving himself to the world toward shaping the future for both realms he calls home. As he matured into his role, Arthur worked tirelessly to ease the century-old tensions between Atlantis and the surface world, forging fragile alliances while fending off those who saw peace as weakness. His reign as king became more stable, though never free from conflict. Atlantis is a kingdom where coups and rebellions can spring up as quickly as a riptide. Yet with each crisis, Arthur's authority grew, and so did his willingness to redefine what it meant to be Atlantean in the modern world. His personal life also evolved. Arthur's relationship with Mera deepened from political alliance to enduring partnership, the two becoming one of DC's most resilient power couples. Later years saw Aquaman step into the role of mentor and legacy builder. He trained younger heroes in ways ways of the sea, passed on his hard-earned wisdom, and even redefined his Justice League role as a statesman who could broker peace as easily as he could wield a trident. While still a warrior at heart, Arthur's later life is defined by a greater vision, ensuring that the oceans and the people who live above and below them have a chance to thrive long after his own story is told. He became less of an outsider torn between two worlds and more of the bridge strong enough to hold them together. Aquaman's legacy is a reminder that true strength isn't always loud or obvious. It's often found in endurance, adaptability, and the courage to stand between worlds that would rather remain divided. His life has been a constant balancing act, warrior and king, Atlantean and human, protector and avenger. He has navigated political betrayals, personal losses, and battles that span from the ocean's darkest trenches to the farthest reaches of space. Through it all, Arthur Curry has shown that leadership is not about ruling from above, but standing in the tide with your people, willing to fight and bleed beside them. His story teaches resilience in the face of ridicule, the value of diplomacy backed by strength, and the quiet heroism of protecting those who may never truly understand the depth of your sacrifice. For decades, pop culture has tried to reduce him to a punchline, the fish guy in Bright Orange, the hero who could never stand alongside the giants. But the truth is, the giants don't stand above him, they stand beside him. The oceans are vast, ancient, and unforgiving, and Aquaman commands them, not as a novelty, but as their champion. He is the bridge between the surface and the deep, a leader forged in salt water and steel. A man who has defended 70% of the planet more times than the world will ever know. The jokes fade like ripples on the surface, but the tides endure, and so does he. Aquaman is no joke, and in the end, the seas will always remember their king. Born the son of Zeus, king of the Olympian gods, and Hera, queen of Olympus, Ares inherited all of the fire and fury that came with his divine title of God of War. From the moment he could walk, Ares was the embodiment of conflict, thriving on the clash of steel and the cries of battle. Unlike his half-sister Athena, who sought victory through strategy and wisdom, Ares reveled in the chaos itself. To him, war was not a grim necessity, but the purest expression of existence, a crucible where the strong asserted their will and the weak were crushed. Even in the early days, Ares' ambitions were stretched far beyond the gilded palaces of Olympus. He saw mortals not as fragile creatures in need of divine guidance, but as pawns, armies to be rallied, manipulated, and thrown into fires of his endless campaigns. On Olympus, Ares quickly carved a reputation for himself. The gods knew that in times of war, his power swelled, his influence spreading like wildfire across mortal and divine realms alike. But his unrelenting hunger for bloodshed and dominance often put him at odds with his family, especially Athena, whose ideals clashed with his every instinct. Ares thought her brand of war was cold and calculating, stripping away the thrill of the fight, while Athena thought he was reckless, wasteful, and needlessly cruel. This rivalry was more than just siblings arguing, it was the eternal philosophical divide between mind and the fist. Where other gods might have blessed their followers with prosperity or protection, Ares offered them the gift of glorious struggle and the promise of victory, only if they were willing to bleed for it. It was a bargain many took without hesitation, ensuring that his name echoed on the battlefields across the ancient world. Yet for all of his swagger and brutality, Ares was no mere brute. He understood the mechanics of power as well as any politician on Olympus. Fear was a weapon, loyalty a currency, and war was the most profitable venture in existence. His cunning was often overshadowed by his love for direct confrontation, but beneath the clang of armor and roar of combat, Ares played a long game. Even in his youth, he was not content to be just another Olympian deity. He intended to be the force that defined them all. As the god of war, Ares' abilities are as formidable as his ego. His divine nature grants him his immortality, rendering him immune to the ravages of time, disease, and mortal injury. In battle, he possesses superhuman strength, capable of matching even the most powerful Olympians, with stamina and endurance that allow him to wage war for days without faltering. His speed and reflexes, though often overshadowed by his raw power, are equally superhuman, enabling him to move and strike with lethal precision. Ares is also a master of war in all of its forms, both ancient and modern. His skill with weapons is also unparalleled. He can wield swords, spears, axes, and bows with the ease of someone who has done it for millennia. Yet he isn't bound by the limitations of a single era. Ares is just as deadly with firearms and explosives. His combat style blends sheer physical might with centuries of tactical refinement, making him as dangerous in single combat as he is commanding an army. His divine portfolio also gives him a unique form of supernatural influence. the ability to incite conflict and stir the bloodlust of mortals. In his presence, warriors fight harder, leaders make rash decisions, and tensions erupt into violence. Ares can subtly implant mistrust, hatred, and ambition, turning allies into enemies without ever lifting a blade. He thrives on the chaos these manipulations create, drawing the power from every battle, skirmish, or war that his influence touches. Beyond the battle, Ares possesses vast knowledge of military history, strategy, and psychology. He understands not just how to win a war, but to how to ensure it leaves a lasting mark on cultures and civilizations. This intellect makes him more than just a force of destruction. He's a sculptor of history, molding empires and destinies through the steady drumbeat of conflict. To underestimate him as a mere brawler is to fall into the very trap he wants you to. His earliest appearances in the DC comics cast him firmly as an Olympian antagonist, first stirring trouble among his fellow deities before turning his gaze toward the mortal realm. Seeing the rise of humanity as both a threat to his authority and an opportunity to create endless battlefields, he began fostering wars among men, feeding on the chaos and slowly strengthening his influence in the world beyond Olympus. These initial moves established him as a shadowy presence behind the bloodiest pages of history, waging war not through armies of his own, but through the armies of others. One of his most defining early confrontations came when he set his sights on Themyscira, the home of the Amazons. The warrior women favored by Athena stood in direct opposition to his ideals. Ares saw their society as an affront to the very nature of war, and their existence as a threat to his influence over the mortal world. These hostilities would eventually lead him to go face to face with Diana. Ares viewed her as Athena's champion and a dangerous obstacle, and his earliest attempts to crush her involved grand, world-threatening plans that exploited political unrest, manipulated powerful leaders, and even sought to turn the Amazons themselves into instruments of destruction. In these initial battles with Wonder Woman, Ares frequently acted as a master manipulator rather than a direct combatant. He orchestrated conflicts between nations, exploited nuclear fears, and positioned himself so that any resolution would still feed his power, whether through bloodshed or through the lingering tension that followed. These confrontations cemented him as more of a cerebral foe than many of Diana's enemies, wielding both supernatural might and the very human tendencies toward fear and violence. There was even a moment where Ares' schemes forced Wonder Woman into an impossible moral choice, to either strike him down to prevent a catastrophic war, or to find another way to end the conflict without succumbing to the very violence he thrived upon. After his early campaigns against Wonder Woman and the Amazons, Ares entered a more complex phase of his existence, one marked by reinvention, uneasy alliances, and moments that blurred the lines between enemy and reluctant ally. His defeats at Diana's hands did little to curb his ambitions. Instead, they pushed him towards more subtle and more elaborate schemes. Recognizing that brute force alone would not sway the modern world, he began adapting to the shifting nature of warfare. In an age where bombs and politics often replace spears and swords, Ares expanded his influence into arms dealing, organized crime, and even corporate fronts, using mortal systems to cultivate the conflicts he craved. At times, Ares' relationship with Wonder Woman shifted from direct hostility to something more tangled. Certain interpretations showed him offering her cryptic guidance or testing her resolve, less out of benevolence and more to see if she could be swayed toward his worldview. There were rare moments when greater threats to Olympus or the mortal realm forced him into reluctant alliances with her. Never without tension, as trust was a luxury neither afforded the other. Yet these uneasy truces revealed something deeper. Ares recognized Diana as one of the few beings who could truly challenge him, not just on the battlefield, but in the realm of ideals. He also underwent significant transformations, both in role and in form. In some storylines, Ares was stripped of his divine stature. He was forced into mortal guise or diminished in power due to the changes in the pantheon. These moments often fueled his hunger to reclaim former glory, leading him down increasingly dangerous paths. In some interpretations, Ares' story took an unexpected turn. Certain depictions explored the idea that even a god of war could tire of his own endless cycle, pondering whether there might be more to his existence than perpetual conflict. In those rare moments of vulnerability, Ares became something more than a villain. He became a tragic figure trapped in the role destiny had written for him, unable or unwilling to step beyond it. His ruthless philosophy forces both heroes and readers to confront an uncomfortable question. Is peace truly the absence of conflict, or merely a temporary truce between the inevitable battles? Does this strength come from harmony or come from surviving the crucible of war? His importance lies in his dual role as both destroyer and teacher. Every scheme, Every manipulation, every sword raised in his name is a test, not just for Diana, but for the mortal world itself. Ares challenges heroes to prove that compassion can triumph without becoming weakness, and that justice can endure without descending into vengeance. Even in his defeats, he leaves behind a reminder that vigilance is the price of peace, for conflict does not vanish simply because it is unwanted. The lessons Ares offers are paradoxical yet vital. From him, we learn that the unchecked aggression corrodes even the most noble cause, but we also learn that struggle, when fought with purpose, can forge resilience and clarity. In opposing him, Wonder Woman affirms that the truest victories are those won without surrendering one's ideals. He doesn't fall, and he's never truly gone. He waits, in the silence between screams, in the breath before a blade is drawn. Empires may rise and heroes may triumph, but war is a cycle etched into the bones of the world. And when it begins again, Ares will be there, not as a shadow, but as its fire. Roy Harper didn't just grow up fast, he grew up in the shadow of heroes and hardship. Orphaned at a young age, he was taken in by a Navajo medicine man named Bravebow, who became both his guardian and his teacher. Under his care, Roy learned discipline, patience, and the skill to split an arrow mid-air long before he ever met the Emerald Archer himself. His upbringing in the desert wasn't just about survival, it was about finding balance between instinct and precision. When tragedy struck again, Roy's life took another sharp turn. Bravebow had passed away, leaving him feeling devastated. Eventually, Green Arrow did step in as his mentor. The transition from reservation life to the bustling world of superheroes was jarring, but Roy adapted rather quickly. He wasn't satisfied to be just a sidekick. He was determined to prove himself as a hero in his own right. Even in those early days, his rebellious streak hinted that he was never going to be content by just simply following someone else's aim. His skill set is the kind that makes even seasoned heroes take notice. A master archer trained to Olympic-level precision, he can land a shot in conditions that would send most marksmen packing. His time with both Bravebow and Green Arrow gave him a blend of traditional technique and creative flair, allowing him to even turn trick arrows into art. But archery is only part of the equation. Roy is an expert marksman with firearms, throwing weapons, and improvised projectiles, making him dangerous with almost anything in his hands. The years of fieldwork on the reservation had honed his strength and agility, giving him an edge in fights that don't allow for distance. He's also skilled in infiltration, reconnaissance, and survival tactics, habits forged both from his upbringing in the wild and his time running missions with top-tier teams. What sets Roy apart is his adaptability. He can shift from long-range sniper to street-level brawler without missing a beat. Whether he uses high-tech gadgetry or nothing more than a bowstring and grit, he's the kind of fighter who turns the battlefield into his home turf. Roy's years with Green Arrow were as formative as they were complicated. Taken under Oliver Queen's wing after Bravebow's death, he became Speedy, the Archer's quick-handed, sharp-eyed partner. Training alongside Green Arrow pushed his archery to its peak and introduced him to a world of costumed crime fighting that demanded more than just his skill with a bow. Roy learned to think on his feet, adapt to unpredictable situations, and hold his own against threats far larger than himself. Life with Oliver wasn't all clean shots and victories. Their partnership was intense, with Roy often striving to keep pace with his mentor's larger-than-life presence, while also carving out his own sense of identity. The two developed a bond that was part camaraderie, part family, and occasionally part friction. Oliver's unconventional methods and moral convictions shaped Roy's sense of justice, even when the two clashed. Their time together built the foundation for Roy's career as a hero, but it also planted the seeds of his independence. Working alongside Green Arrow taught him the value of precision and timing, and that sometimes even the closest partnerships must make room for growth. Roy's most harrowing fight came not from the streets, but from within. Still a teenager, barely out of boyhood, he spiraled into heroin use during a period when his mentor Green Arrow was absent from his life. Feeling abandoned and desperate to numb the ache, he slipped deeper until the truth came to light, a revelation that shattered the trust between them. The fallout was raw and personal, forcing Roy through painful withdrawal and the slow grinding work of recovery. The experience left scars that never fully faded, shaping the man that he would become, someone who carried his mistakes like old battle wounds, using them to fuel his resolve as arsenal and to guide others away from the same darkness he once knew too well. After years of operating in Green Arrow's shadow, he stepped into his own identity, trading the bright colors and bowstrings for a far more versatile arsenal. You see what I did there? The transformation marked a break from being seen as just a kid with a bow and into someone who could handle any mission, any weapon, and any opponent. The change reflected more than practicality. It was an evolution of attitude. He was no longer the eager protege trying to prove himself. He was a professional who had already proven it. The new persona also carried a harder edge. Arsenal was sharper, more tactical, and far less interested in fitting the traditional hero mold. It was Roy embracing his independence and refusing to be defined by his past, even as the lessons from it continued to shape his aim. His rise began when he took leadership of the Titans during a time of instability. Rather than simply firing arrows from the sidelines, Roy was in the war room, calling shots and directing a roster of heroes with vastly different powers and personalities. In one high-stakes operation, he orchestrated a counterstrike against a terrorist group, Hive, commanding assaults to dismantle their command structure. It was a victory that showcased his tactical skill and ability to get a fractured team working as one. His government work pulled him into even riskier territory. As a part of a federal team, Checkmate, Roy found himself embedded deep in hostile environments, often undercover. On one mission, he infiltrated a rogue nation supplying weapons to metahuman mercenaries, posing as an arms dealer to dismantle the operation from within. With nothing but concealed weaponry, his wits, and a dangerous cover story, Roy managed to sabotage their chain and extract intelligence that stopped a full-scale attack. It was a reminder that Arsenal wasn't just a marksman, he was a covert operative who could turn the enemy's own ground against them. But some of his most personal and painful moments also defined him. After the destruction of Star City and the loss of his daughter, Leanne, Roy fell into one of the darkest periods of his life. Despite severe injury and grief, he returned to the field, refusing to let tragedy end his career. His path back was violent and messy, involving a hunt for the Executioner, the villain responsible for his daughter's death. This led to a brutal confrontation that tested his morality as much as his skill. Even with all of the loss, Roy's ability to rise again cemented Arsenal as a survivor, one whose greatest weapon was his refusal to break. Once a boy with a bow to the battle-hardened figure of Arsenal, his story is a reminder that heroism is rarely a straight line. His journey has been marked by triumphs earned by his skill and strategy, but also by setbacks that demanded resilience over raw strength. He faced betrayal, personal tragedy, and the weight of operating in the morally gray spaces where easy answers don't exist. And through it all, he refused to stand down. The lessons in his path are as sharp as the arrows he once carried. Growth means stepping out from the comfort of someone else's shadow, even when the world doubts you. True leadership requires more than commanding a team. It demands listening, adapting, and sometimes making decisions that carry personal cost. And perhaps most of all, survival isn't just about avoiding defeat, it's about finding the will to rise again after the hardest falls. In the wider DC universe, Arsenal stands as living proof that you don't need powers to be extraordinary. His legacy isn't built on invincibility, but on the grit to face danger head on and the courage to keep going even when the fight gets personal. He has been a leader, a sidekick, a covert operative, and a survivor, and each chapter has sharpened him into a hero who refuses to be defined by his scars. Roy Harper adapts, he evolves, and he wins battles that others wouldn't dare fight. In a world of gods and legends, he reminds us that determination can hit harder than any superpower, and that the strongest heroes are often the ones who keep getting back up, ready to take the next shot. Atlanna's story begins far from the surface world, deep beneath the waves in the shining kingdom of Atlantis. Born into its royal line, she grew up with the weight of duty pressing against her shoulders almost as firmly as the tides themselves. From the moment she could swim, her life was shaped by courtly expectation, ancient traditions, and the political currents that flowed just as powerfully as the ocean around her. Unlike many Atlanteans, Atlanna's curiosity was stretched far beyond the confines of her people's borders. She was known to be a restless spirit, a woman whose heart was stirred not only by the mysteries of the deep, but also by the whispers of the world above. That sense of wonder set her apart, making her both admired and carefully watched. Her early years in Atlantis taught her discipline, resilience, and the difficult balance between loyalty to her kingdom and the pull of her own instincts. Atlanna was a princess who embodied strength and elegance, but beneath that regal exterior was a daring streak, one that hinted at choices she would one day make and that would forever tie her fate to both land and sea. Like all Atlanteans, she could breathe both underwater and in open air. Her body adapted to survive the crushing depths of the ocean, her strength far greater than that of a human, allowing her to battle even the fiercest of predators of the deep. She was also capable at swimming at remarkable speeds, moving through water faster than the eye could follow. Her endurance made her long journeys across the sea effortless, and her reflexes were finely tuned, both for combat and survival. Beyond her physical power, she had a commanding presence and a natural gift for leadership. Atlanna could inspire loyalty in her subjects and navigate the turbulent politics of Atlantis with poise. Atlanna's story in the comics is one of sacrifice, love, and the consequences of her own choices. one of her earliest defining moments came when she fell in love with Tom Curry, a lighthouse keeper from the surface. Their relationship was unprecedented, bridging the two worlds that rarely met in peace. From that union came Arthur Curry, who would one day become Aquaman. Her return to Atlantis marked another pivotal moment. Forced to leave Tom and Arthur behind, she was compelled by her duties as queen and her arranged marriage to Orvax Marius. Orvax Marius is an Atlantean royal, most often depicted as the king of Atlantis during the time Atlanta had returned to her people. He's usually presented as her husband by arrangement rather than affection, a match driven by political duty rather than personal choice. Through this union, Orvax fathered Orm, the one who would later become Ocean Master, Arthur Curry's half-brother and one of his greatest rivals. Unlike Atlanta, Orvax is not remembered for compassion or diplomacy. His role in the comics leans towards stern authority and the preservation of Atlantean tradition. He represents the rigid expectations of the throne and the divide between Atlantis and the surface. His presence in Atlanta's life underscores her conflict between love and obligation, making him an important figure that fractured the family dynamic that shaped both Arthur and Orm. Atlanta's later appearances often deepen the tragedy of her story. In some tellings, she perished because of political schemes in Atlantis. In others, she was revealed to have survived, but only to be imprisoned or hidden away. These variations all deliver the same theme. Atlanta was both a queen and a victim of Atlantis' harsh traditions. Her legacy is through the destinies of her sons. Arthur became Aquaman, carrying her strength and compassion into the world above. Orm, however, inherited the bitterness of her absence, channeling it into his own claim to the throne. Atlanta's greatest moments weren't the battles she fought herself, but the choices that shaped two of Atlantis' most important figures and altered the course of the Ocean Kingdom forever. Atlanta's story is not just a tale of a queen, but the foundation of Aquaman's entire legacy. She embodies the tension between love and duty, the push and pull of the world that struggles to coexist. Her life choices, falling in love with a human, returning to a throne she didn't want, and raising sons who would become bitter enemies, shaped not only her family but the fate of Atlantis itself. Her importance in the mythos lies in her role as both bridge and barrier. She connected Atlantis to the surface through Arthur, yet her forced separation from him left scars that would never fully heal. She gave Atlantis another heir in Orm, but that very act planted the seeds of rivalry and conflict. Atlanta's story reminds us readers that the most powerful legacies often come not from thrones or crowns, but from the quiet, human choices of love, sacrifice, and survival. The lesson of Atlanta is that no destiny is simple, and no act of love is without consequence. She stands as a reminder that compassion can defy tradition, and that the bond we form, even when broken, can ripple outwards to shape history. Through her, the mythology of Atlantis is not just one of kings and battles, but of a mother whose heart carried the weight of two worlds. The Atom is a mantle that has been carried by 6 distinct figures whose lives have reshaped the meaning of heroism. Though each successor brought their own approach, together they formed a lineage that shows how the smallest presence can have the greatest impact. Al Pratt was the very first hero to bear the name Atom. Before becoming a costumed crime fighter, he lived the life of an ordinary college student. Small in stature but often overlooked by his peers, he struggled with feelings of inadequacy. Despite his size, he carried a strong will and an eagerness to prove himself. His determination often clashed with the perception that he lacked the presence or ability to stand out. His life changed when he met Joe Morgan, a seasoned former boxer who took an interest in shaping him into something greater. Under Joe's strict training, Al grew into a skilled fighter. The physical discipline gave him not only strength, but also a new sense of confidence and direction. What began as a way to defend himself soon became the very foundation of his heroism. With this transformation, Al decided to put his skills to the test against criminals and corrupt figures plaguing society. He fashioned the identity of the Atom, a name that reflected his small size but also his growing strength and determination. Though he lacked superhuman powers at the start, his relentless spirit and training allowed him to hold his own among more gifted heroes. As the first Atom, Al Pratt set the tone for the legacy that would follow, proving that courage and perseverance could elevate even the most underestimated individual into a symbol of hope. Al Pratt's career as the Atom is remembered for the way it grew from a humble beginning into a story of resilience and legacy. Though he started as a powerless brawler, scholar, he became a cornerstone figure in the world of heroes, leaving his mark through several defining moments. One of his most notable achievements was his membership in the Justice Society of America. As one of the founding heroes, Al stood beside legends far more powerful than himself. Despite lacking flashy abilities, he proved his worth through determination, courage, and earning the respect of his teammates. This was a significant milestone because it showed that sheer willpower and skill could carry equal weight to godlike strength or mystic talent. Another important chapter in his story came when radiation exposure granted him superhuman strength and stamina. This transformation elevated him beyond the role of scrappy fighter and allowed him to contribute on a larger scale. His atomic punch became a signature move, giving him a presence that matched his allies while preserving the underdog spirit that defined his beginnings. Al's later years further cemented his influence. He grew into a mentor and a father figure, guiding the next generation of heroes. In this way, Al Pratt's most notable moments extended beyond his own battles, as his life helped shape the course of heroism for those who followed. Ray Palmer was the second and most well-known hero to carry the mantle of the Atom. Long before stepping into that role, he lived a life shaped by curiosity and an insatiable drive to understand the world around him. From a young age, he demonstrated an extraordinary aptitude for science, with a particular fascination for physics. His mind thrived on complex problems and he pushed himself to pursue knowledge at the highest level. His academic path led him to become a respected professor where he immersed himself in groundbreaking research. Among his greatest interests was the study of matter and the possibility of manipulating size at a molecular level. This pursuit was more than a theory for Ray. It was a challenge that became central to his life's work. The dedication he had in his field set him apart from his peers, and his relentless experimentation was both fueled by passion and a willingness to take risks that others would not. During one of his experiments, Ray succeeded in creating the means of altering size. What had once only been a scientific dream was now in his hands. Rather than keeping this discovery confined to the laboratory, he recognized its potential for something greater. His desire to protect others and to test the true limits of his work led him to adopt the identity of the Atom. With this, Ray Palmer became the first to embody the shrinking legacy that would define the mantle for generations to come. As the first Atom to wield true size-changing powers, he expanded the scope of what the mantle could represent, and many of his most notable moments are tied to the way he pushed those limits. One of his earliest achievements was proving that his shrinking technology could be used as a tool for heroism rather than just science. He was able to reduce himself to a microscopic size while maintaining his full strength, and this innovation set him apart as a unique kind of hero. His ability to move through hidden spaces, slip past defenses, and tackle threats from an angle no one else could reach made him indispensable to his allies. Ray's place in the Justice League of America became another defining element of his career. Though surrounded by heroes of immense power, he proved that intelligence and precision could be just as important as raw strength. He often used his scientific mind to solve problems no one else could, making him both a fighter and a strategist. His contributions often determined the difference between victory and failure in the League's greatest battles. Beyond the battlefield, Ray's life carried personal challenges that shaped his legacy. His complicated relationship with Jean Loring became central to his story and later tragedies. These struggles gave his character a more human dimension, showing that even a man who could master the fabric of matter was not immune to heartbreak and loss. Another of his most notable arcs came when he shrank beyond the microscopic world and discovered an entire civilization hidden within the microverse. These journeys pushed the Atom into the realm of explorer as much as hero, expanding DC's universe and reinforcing his role as a bridge between science and adventure. Together, these moments defined Ray Palmer as more than just a shrinking hero. He became a figure of discovery, resilience, and intellect. His story proved that heroism isn't about size, but about the vision and courage to push into the unknown. Next was Adam Cray, and his path to becoming the Atom was unlike those who carried the mantle before him. He was not a lifelong scientist or a seasoned fighter, but instead the son of a well-respected government official. His upbringing gave him a life of privilege and access, yet it also left him searching for direction and purpose. Though intelligent and capable, Adam had not carved out a clear identity of his own in his early years. That changed after tragedy struck his family. The loss of his father, who had been assassinated, became a pivotal moment that reshaped Adam's life. His grief and anger left him vulnerable, but it also made him determined to honor his father's memory in some way. This determination eventually brought him into contact with Ray Palmer, the established Atom. Ray saw saw in Adam someone who could serve a unique purpose. Rather than guiding him through years of scientific research or combat training, Ray recruited Adam into a covert mission that required secrecy and deception. To protect Ray's own survival and to root out corruption, Adam was given a version of the size-changing technology and instructed to assume the identity of the Atom. In this way, Adam Cray became the third to wear the mantle. His early life did not prepare him for the role the same way it did for the others, but his personal loss and his willingness to step into dangerous territory gave him the motivation he needed. His journey into heroism was sudden, born of circumstance rather than destiny, and it set him apart as one of the most unconventional figures ever to bear the Atom name. Adam Cray's time as the Atom was brief, but it carried moments that set him apart from the other bearers of the mantle. His story was one defined by secrecy, sacrifice, and the willingness to put himself in danger for a cause larger than himself. One of his most notable roles came through his work with Ray Palmer, who had entrusted him to wear the Atom identity as part of an undercover operation. By taking on the mantle, Adam was able to draw attention away from Ray, who had gone into hiding to expose a network of corruption and espionage. This deception allowed Ray to work in the shadows while Adam bore the risk of being the public face of the Atom. His courage in accepting the responsibility showed his loyalty and resolve, even though he lacked the years of experience of his predecessor. Adam's involvement with the Suicide Squad was another defining moment. Operating under the Atom's name, he lent his abilities to the team, navigating missions where survival was never guaranteed. His service there revealed a surprising level of bravery as he continually put himself in peril despite the uncertainty of his place among hardened operatives. What was probably the most striking part of his legacy was the way it ended. Adam's life as the Atom came to a tragic close when he was killed in the line of duty. His sacrifice underscored the risks of heroism and the weight that came with wearing the mantle. While his career was short, Adam Cray's most notable contribution was his willingness to stand in as a hero, carrying the weight of the Atom's name in a time of need and proving that a brief spark could add to the legacy of a great fire. Ryan Choi was the fourth individual to take up the mantle of the Atom, and his journey began far from the battles and the dangers of the superhero world. He grew up in Hong Kong, where his sharp intellect and deep interest in science quickly set him apart. From a young age, Ryan devoted himself to his studies, showing not only natural talent but also an eagerness to immerse himself in the most complex ideas he could find. His brilliance was paired with an optimistic and curious outlook, making him as approachable as he was gifted. As he pursued his academic career, Ryan focused heavily on theoretical physics. His work and reputation eventually drew the attention of Ray Palmer, who would both become an inspiration and a mentor from afar. When the opportunity arose for Ryan to teach at Ivy University, where Ray had built his own legacy, Ryan seized it. This move would become the turning point of his life. Settling into his role as professor, Ryan discovered that Ray had left behind the BioBelt, a device capable of harnessing size-changing technology. Ray had seen in Ryan a kindred spirit, someone with both the intellect to understand his work and the heart to use it responsibly. By inheriting this technology, Ryan stepped into the role of the Atom, honoring his predecessor's legacy while bringing his own voice and perspective to the mantle. His early life as a bright, inquisitive student and passionate teacher became the foundation for his path as a hero. Ryan Choi's time as the Atom was marked by a blend of scientific wonder, optimism, and bravery, which made his era with the mantle stand out. Though he entered the world of heroes with less experience than those before him, his curiosity and willingness to embrace the unknown gave him moments that defined his legacy. As he grew more confident, Ryan became involved with larger heroics, including working alongside members of the Justice League. His ability to shrink and explore micro-worlds opened paths that no one else could follow. These journeys led him into realms hidden within the fabric of reality, where he demonstrated both his scientific brilliance and his courage. His discoveries not only expanded the understanding of the DC universe, but also reinforced his role as a unique kind of adventurer. Ryan also stood out for the personal warmth he carried into his role. Unlike some of his predecessors, he approached challenges with humor and heart, bringing levity to situations that might otherwise overwhelm. This balance of intellect and optimism made him a valuable teammate and a relatable figure to those he protected. His story was not without hardship in the struggles he faced as both a hero and a man stepping into the shoes of someone legendary, which added weight to his journey. Yet it was precisely these challenges that defined his legacy. Ryan Choi's most notable moments were not just battles won, but the way he proved that a new generation incarnation could carry the Atom's mantle with dignity, intelligence, and humanity. Then there was Atom 1 million, a far future successor to the Atom mantle, emerging not from the modern world but from the distant 853rd century. Unlike Al Pratt, Ray Palmer, Adam Cray, or even Ryan Choi, this incarnation of the Atom was not shaped by an ordinary childhood or the familiar struggles of the present. Instead, his quote-unquote early life is tied to the highly advanced society of his era, a time when humanity and technology had evolved far beyond the boundaries of the age of superheroes as we know it. Born into a world where science and superhuman achievements were inseparable, Atom 1 million grew up surrounded by the extraordinary advancements. His world was part of a future where the Justice League Alpha carried on the traditions of the Justice League, preserving their ideals across centuries. From the beginning, he was steeped in the legacy of those who came before, with knowledge of the mantle of the Atom forming a central part of his identity. What set him apart was his adaptation from the microverse, a realm of existence beneath the fabric of conventional reality. From an early point in his development, Atom 1 million's abilities and very nature were designed around exploring and thriving in that dimension. His path to becoming the Atom was not one of discovery through invention like Ray Palmer, but one of evolution, shaped by the scientific and societal progress of his time. By embodying the mantle in an era where exploration of the microscopic was vital, Atom 1 million became the living continuation of a legacy, proving that even in the farthest reaches of time, the name Atom still carried meaning. As a bonus, I'm throwing in Rhonda Pineda. Her story begins far from the world of the Justice League. She grew up on Earth 3, a twisted parallel world where morality was inverted and crime thrived as the natural order. Unlike the nurturing environments that helped shape the earlier Atoms, Rhonda's early life was marked by manipulation and survival in a society ruled by corruption and self-interest. From the beginning, she learned to use her intelligence and charm as tools, masking her ambition behind the appearance of innocence. As she matured, she became involved with the Crime Syndicate of America, the ruling force of Earth 3. There, her talents for deception and her ruthless drive made her a natural fit among the Syndicate's ranks. Through her connections with them, she gained access to technology that allowed her to manipulate size, much like Ray Palmer, though her motivations were entirely different. She did not pursue science for discovery or heroism, but instead adopted it as a weapon to secure her own power. When she crossed into Prime Earth, she hid her true origins by posing as a young woman in need of guidance. She took on the mantle of the Atom, joining the Justice League and convincing others she was a hero. Behind her mask of kindness, however, she remained loyal to the Crime Syndicate, working as a spy and saboteur. Her early life on Earth 3, shaped by corruption and opportunism, set the stage for her deception and eventual revelation as Atomica, the first Atom to truly twist the mantle into something sinister. For a time, she fought alongside trusted icons, hiding her true nature. Her success in convincing the League to accept her showed both her cunning and her depth of deception. Her defining moment, however, was the reveal of her allegiance to the Crime Syndicate. At the height of their invasion, she turned against the League, exposing her identity as Atomica. Her betrayal shocked her allies and showcased the danger of hidden threats within the ranks of heroes. It was not only her size-changing powers that made her formidable, but also her ability to strike from within, where trust had left the Justice League vulnerable. Her legacy as Atomica is not one of hope, but corruption. She took the Atom's name, a mantle associated with science and perseverance, and twisted it into a tool for sabotage. In doing so, Rhonda became the first bearer of the Atom title to fully betray the trust it symbolized, leaving behind a story remembered for its treachery rather than triumph. The legacy of the Atom is not bound to a single hero, but to a collection of lives that carried the mantle, each one leaving behind lessons about strength, discovery, and even the dangers of corruption. Together, they remind us that the smallest actions can have the greatest impact, and that every bearer, whether noble or deceitful, adds something meaningful to the story. Al Pratt, the first Atom, showed us that power begins not with superhuman gifts, but with perseverance. His journey from overlooked student to respected hero teaches us the value of resilience and the belief that determination can overcome limitations. He embodied the lesson that greatness is born in the refusal to quit. Ray Palmer carried the mantle into its most iconic form, using science to unlock new frontiers. His legacy teaches us that curiosity and intellect can be just as heroic as physical strength. Through him, the Atom became a symbol of discovery and the courage to explore the unknown, a reminder that knowledge is a form of power. Adam Cray represents the weight of sacrifice. His time as the Atom was short, but his willingness to risk his life in secrecy and deception showcased the idea that heroism is not measured by how long one wears the mask, but by the willingness to step into danger for others. His story teaches us about duty even when glory is absent. Ryan Choi brought a new spirit to the mantle, blending science with optimism and heart. His story emphasizes that legacy is not about limitation, but about carrying values forward with your own voice. He teaches us that the next generation can honor the past while shaping the future with compassion and individuality. Atom 1 Million illustrates the endurance of ideals. Even in the distant future, the name of the atom still holds meaning, showing us that the values of exploration and protection transcends time. His existence is a lesson in legacy itself, proof that the seeds of today can bloom into symbols for tomorrow. Rhonda Pineda as Atomica stands as a cautionary tale. By corrupting the mantle for betrayal, she teaches us that power without integrity erodes trust and destroys community. Her story reminds us to guard against deception and to recognize that symbols only hold meaning when wielded with honesty. Taken together, the atoms reflect the many faces of human choice: determination, discovery, sacrifice, compassion, legacy, and betrayal. Each bearer, for better or worse, reveals something about what it means to hold power, and the mantle itself endures as a reminder that significance is not measured in size, but in the impact of one's actions. Albert Rothstein was born into a complicated legacy. His family line was marked by both heroism and villainy. His grandfather, a man known as Cyclotron, had been a reluctant supervillain whose altered biology left lasting effects. These changes were passed down genetically, giving Albert latent metahuman potential. From an early age, it was clear he wasn't ordinary. He grew up under the watchful eye of his godfather, Al Pratt. Al, who had once been the original Atom, was a respected member of the Justice Society. He became a mentor and father figure to Albert, offering structure and guidance. Albert admired Al's strength and conviction. More importantly, he saw in him an example of how to use his power responsibly. As Albert matured, so did his abilities. He began to show signs of enhanced strength and the ability to manipulate his own molecular structure. This allowed him to grow in size and density, making him incredibly durable and powerful. These changes came with challenges though. His powers were raw and often difficult to control. Still, he pushed himself to train and adapt. He struggled with the dual nature of his heritage. On one side stood Al Pratt, a man of principle, and on the other loomed the memory of Cyclotron, whose choices had caused great harm. Albert wanted to prove he was more than the product of his bloodline. He wanted to earn his place in the world on his own terms. That desire became his foundation. He chose to become a hero not because it was expected of him, but because he believed in the purpose it served. With strength, determination, and a growing sense of duty, Albert Rothstein began his journey toward becoming the man who would one day be known as Atom Smasher. Albert began his superhero career using the name Nuclon. He wanted to stand out and build something of his own. His grandfather, Al Pratt, had been the original Atom, but Albert didn't want to follow directly in his footsteps. He needed an identity that felt separate. He eventually became a founding member of Infinity Inc. The team was made up of the sons, daughters, and protégés of the Justice Society of America. Some of his teammates included Jade and Obsidian, who were the twin siblings fathered by Alan Scott. There was also Brainwave Jr. and Silver Scarab, who would eventually one day take the mantle of Dr. Fate. They were young and unproven. Many people doubted them and saw them as inexperienced. That doubt, though, pushed Albert to work even harder. He wanted to earn respect and prove that he was more than just a legacy. Albert quickly became the team's powerhouse. His ability to grow larger and increase his molecular density made him strong and durable. At first, he struggled to control those abilities. Growing too large would exhaust him. Increasing his weight could make him powerful, but also slow and hard to move. He spent hours training on his own. He practiced growing only a few feet taller instead of jumping to his full height. He worked on staying balanced during movement and striking with control. Despite his physical strength, Albert lacked confidence. He didn't see himself as a leader or a planner. He often stayed quiet during strategy discussions and let others take charge. But when his time came to act, he never hesitated. He was usually the first one to move. His teammates began to rely on him. They knew that he would always protect them and follow through. Albert formed strong friendships during this time. He became especially close with Obsidian. Both of them carried the weight of famous parents and complicated legacies. Those friendships helped him stay grounded. They reminded him that he wasn't alone in trying to prove himself. As the team gained more experience, Albert began to change. The name Nuclon started to feel like something from his past. It had served its purpose, but he no longer needed to stand apart from Al Pratt. He began to accept that honoring his godfather shouldn't mean losing himself. He was ready to step forward with a new sense of purpose. His journey was no longer about trying to belong, it was about becoming the man he was meant to be. After years of serving as Nuklon, Albert decided to change his name to Adam Smasher. The shift marked more than just a costume change, it was a sign of growth. He no longer felt the need to separate himself from Al Pratt. Instead, he wanted to honor the man who had guided him. The new name connected him to his godfather's legacy while signaling a more serious phase in his own career. As Adam Smasher, Albert adopted a more refined and imposing look. He wore a darker, more armored suit that reflected his maturity. Albert's reputation grew quickly. He was no longer seen as a young hero with raw power. He had become a respected member of the Justice Society of America. He served alongside veterans like Jay Garrick and Alan Scott. With his new identity came greater responsibility. Adam Smasher was no longer a follower. He made decisions and acted on conviction. At times, this did lead to conflict. Albert had strong beliefs about justice and personal responsibility. He was willing to go further than some of his teammates were comfortable with. He began to question whether doing the right thing always meant following the rules. One of the most significant changes in Albert's life was his willingness to make hard choices. He carried guilt and grief over the loss of his mother who had died in a terrorist attack. That event had a lasting effect on him. It pushed him toward a path where justice felt personal. He tracked the man down responsible for her death and made the decision to kill him. It was a choice that caused tension within the Justice Society. Some of the members believed he had crossed the line, while others understood his pain but could not condone his actions. This period shaped Albert in lasting ways. He was still a hero, but now one with deeper scars. He carried the weight of his choices without excuses. He didn't ask for forgiveness, he simply kept moving forward. The name Adam Smasher came to represent both the strength of his body and the heaviness of his conscience. Through it all, Albert never stopped striving to do better. He knew he had flaws and he knew he had made mistakes, but he also knew that his heart was in the right place. As Adam Smasher, he stood not just as a symbol of strength, but as a man shaped by experience, guided by loyalty, and defined by his willingness to stand tall in every sense of the word. Albert Rothstein's story is one of strength, loss, and growth. He didn't become a hero for attention. He earned that role through dedication and sacrifice. His journey was shaped by the people he admired and the pain he carried. As Adam Smasher, he chose to honor the legacy of his godfather. He stepped out of the shadow of his past and accepted the responsibility that came with power. He was never the loudest voice or the most celebrated figure, but he stayed steady. He stayed true. His decision to kill the man connected to his mother's death changed everything. It pushed him into conflict with those he once stood beside. It forced him to face judgment from the very people he called friends. He didn't run from that moment though. He stood by it, not for pride, but for principle. Albert's story shows us that being a hero is not about perfection, it's about choice. It's about living with what you do and learning from what you become. He made mistakes, but he kept going. He never let failure define him. His legacy teaches us one lesson above all. Strength is not just about power, it's about carrying the weight of your actions and staying in the fight, even when it hurts or even when you stand alone.
With blood and rage of crimson red, ripped from a corpse so freshly dead, together with our hellish hate, will burn you all. That is your fate!
Some characters begin with destiny. Atrocitus began with annihilation. To understand the complexity of his character, we first need to understand what created him. The Guardians of the Universe are an ancient race of immortals from the planet Oa. They see themselves as overseers of order across the cosmos and created the Green Lantern Corps to enforce that vision. Small in stature but vast in knowledge and power, they're often strict, detached, and focused on maintaining balance, sometimes at the cost of compassion or free will. The Guardians of the Universe first attempted to maintain cosmic order by creating the Manhunters, a force of emotionless androids. The Manhunters carried out their duties with absolute inflexibility, interpreting justice in cold and literal terms. This lack of compassion eventually led to the slaughter of nearly all life in Sector 666. In that sector, Atrocitus was once known as Atros, a man of peace. He lived with his wife and children on the planet Reeved. Their lives were simple and quiet. There was no war, no hunger, and no warning. That's when the Manhunters came. Atros lost everything. His family, his home, and his sense of safety were all stripped away in a matter of moments. He survived the massacre but emerged from it as something else entirely. Grief hollowed him out. In its place grew something colder and darker. He began to despise the Guardians for their carelessness and their silence. In his eyes, they had allowed this atrocity to happen, and he refused to let that go unpunished. Atros joined with 4 others who had survived the same genocide. Together, they became known as the 5 Inversions. They embraced dark sciences and rituals that most civilizations feared. Their purpose was to bring about the end of the Guardians and ensure that no one else suffered as they had. However, Atros went further than the others. While the rest became prophets of destruction, he remained focused on a different path. He saw justice where others only wanted chaos. The Guardians had not only created killers, but they had abandoned responsibility. That truth became the foundation of Atros's transformation. He didn't wait for power to be given. He reached into the raw energy of rage itself and pulled forth something new. Through ancient rituals and bleeding-edge science, he forged the first red power ring. When the ring latched to his finger, it consumed his heart and replaced it with fire. His blood boiled into plasma and his voice carried the roar of the void. This is when Atros officially became Atrocitus, the first Red Lantern. He wasn't a servant of will or hope or even fear. He was fury made manifest, a weapon born of grief, a firestorm with purpose, and he would burn a path through the cosmos until justice was served. Atrocitus possesses one of the most volatile and destructive power sets in the emotional spectrum. As the first Red Lantern, his abilities are fueled entirely by rage. Unlike other ring wielders, his power isn't shaped by thought or imagination. It erupts from raw emotion and manifests through violent force. The red power ring allows him to generate powerful energy constructs, but most Red Lanterns favor direct attacks over precision. Atrocitus is no exception. His strength lies in overwhelming his enemies with brutal force rather than technique. One of his most defining traits is the way his power has altered his body. The ring replaced his heart and floods his veins with searing red plasma that pours from his mouth when he attacks. The corrosive substance isn't just energy, it's weaponized hate. It can melt through defenses and continue to burn even after contact. Atrocitus can unleash this plasma in wide blasts or direct streams. It's the extension of his anger made tangible. Unlike many Red Lanterns who lose their higher brain functions to their rage, Atrocitus retains his intellect and strategic thinking. This makes him far more dangerous. He can lead, plan, and adapt. The Red Ring also grants him flight, durability, and enhanced physical strength. He can survive in space, heal from fatal injuries, and tear through armored targets with ease. His endurance pushes beyond that of most Green Lanterns, and his will is rarely shaken. Through ancient rituals and his connection to the Red Lantern power battery, Atrocitus also commands a limited form of prophecy and mysticism. He's able to read blood and gain insight into possible futures or hidden truths. This blood magic is unique to him and grants him an edge beyond simple combat. Atrocitus isn't a chaotic beast, he's a weapon sharpened by grief. His power isn't wild by accident, it's controlled fury. His every action, every strike is driven with purpose, and through his rage, he makes the universe listen. Atrocitus made his mark long before the universe knew his name. After creating the first red power ring, he began building a core of his own. He traveled across the galaxy, seeking out those consumed by rage and offering them the same fire that burned inside him. His recruits became the Red Lantern Corps, and their creation was no quiet affair. Atrocitus launched a direct assault on the Green Lanterns and the Guardians, carving out a bloody path through space. His message was simple: rage would no longer be ignored. His first major confrontation came when he clashed with Sinestro and Hal Jordan. Atrocitus viewed both with contempt. Sinestro represented fear and tyranny. Hal Jordan embodied the will of an institution that had failed his people. During this encounter, Atrocitus nearly killed Sinestro. It was only Hal's interference that saved him. Despite their differences, the confrontation made something clear. Atrocitus wasn't a villain in a traditional sense. He was an executioner of justice, twisted but deliberate. His rage was righteous in his own eyes, and often in the eyes of others. One of his most significant choices came when he created a Red Lantern on Earth. He selected a cat named Dexter. Dexter, with a broken past, had a heart full of vengeance after his owner was killed, and he was left to fend for himself. It was an unexpected choice, but it showed Atrocitus' deep understanding of rage. He saw potential where others saw weakness. That same insight led him to create another Red Lantern, a woman named Bleeze. Though she began a victim of war, she evolved into a fierce and loyal enforcer of his cause. Atrocitus' leadership turned the Red Lantern Corps into more than just a blunt instrument. It became a sanctuary for the broken. At one point, he even allied himself with heroes to stop larger threats to the emotional spectrum. Though uneasy, the cooperation revealed the complexity of his character. He wasn't driven by conquest, he was driven by pain. When the threat of the Black Lanterns emerged, Atrocitus fought to preserve life, not destroy it. He knew the difference between vengeance and oblivion. That distinction shaped many of his future decisions. Eventually, his own corps did turn against him. His brutal leadership led to a rebellion, and Atrocitus was cast out by those he once led. But even in exile, he remained a force. He created a new power battery, forged new followers, and reclaimed his title through sheer will. And as you may have guessed, that betrayal only deepened his hatred, but it also clarified his purpose. He no longer sought just revenge, he sought balance. He believed rage had a place in the emotional spectrum and that the universe would never find peace without it. Through war, exile, and resurrection, Atrocitus proved one thing above all. He's not a servant of destruction, he's an architect when justice demands it. His story is not one of conviction, and in a universe full of light and lies, his fury burns with brutal clarity. Atrocitus is important because he represents the side of emotion that most stories choose to silence. His presence in the universe is a response to injustice. He wasn't born evil, he was made through loss. Everything he does is rooted in the truth that unchecked systems can destroy lives without facing consequence. His rage is not aimless, it's directed at those who let tragedy happen and then look away. His role in the larger mythos isn't to spread fear or chaos, but to challenge the idea that peace is built only through will and hope. Atrocitus shows that anger has a place, it speaks for those who were erased, and it breaks through indifference. His actions may be violent, but his motives aren't hollow. He gives power to the powerless and a voice to the voiceless. This makes him more than a villain, it makes him necessary. The lesson in his story isn't that rage should control us, it's that rage needs to be understood. When guided by purpose, it can become a force that exposes failure and demands change. Atrocitus teaches us that silence in the face of suffering is just as dangerous as violence itself.